Hey, welcome back. Today we'll be talking about a specific genre of Shakespeare play, the problem play. When we categorize plays in Shakespeare, we usually sort them into a few categories: comedies, tragedies, and histories. Those are the categories placed on the first folio by some of Shakespeare's friends. However, scholars throughout the years have found it useful to include a few other subcategories, because some plays just don't quite fit into those three categories. So if we're looking at a fun comedy like Twelfth Night, and then we pick up another Shakespeare comedy, Measure for Measure, we'll find the experience very, very different. In the late 1800s, F.S. Boaz, a critic, came up with the term problem play to describe plays that don't seem to quite fit into their genre. Specifically, he's looking at some of Shakespeare's plays that tend to bend the form of comedy beyond what it can endure. Although Boaz also talks about Hamlet as a transitional play between these plays and Shakespeare's tragedies, generally people, when they talk about the problem plays, are talking about three plays in particular: All's Well That Ends Well, Measure for Measure, and Troilus and Cressida. The term problem play has sometimes been used in other ways as well. Some people have used it to talk about plays where the authenticity of the play is uncertain, or plays that they just don't like. But generally, when we're talking about the problem plays, we're talking about these three plays. If you've ever read or watched these plays, you will probably find that they're very unsatisfying. At least the endings tend to, as Boaz says, induce bewilderment. What did I just watch there? It's not that Shakespeare fails to pull these plays off. These plays are very engaging. All's Well That Ends Well is one that I enjoy reading over and over and over again. Measure for Measure as well, although I feel like I need to take a shower every time I'm finished with it. What Shakespeare is doing is offering a challenge in these plays. He's challenging certain norms that people have established, and challenging overly simplified images of love and evil. Not that these three plays are entirely unique, because Shakespeare has been asking difficult questions throughout his entire body of work. Look at Merchant of Venice and the character of Shylock, or the ending of Two Gentlemen of Verona. But these three plays particularly stand out because of the pervasiveness of the cynicism and questioning. The characters within these plays tend to be fairly unsympathetic, especially the men. Although one might find some of the male characters in some of Shakespeare's other comedies a little bit aloof, a little bit, kind of doofusy, there's something much more grating about the failures in these plays. In all three of these, the men deeply fail to take responsibility for their actions. They pursue their desires without responsibility, and it's only once they are trapped or tricked into responsibility do they actually have to face the music. But even then, it's hard to see any real change. Bertram in All's Well That Ends Well completely runs away from his responsibility as a married man and tries to go off to war with his buddies, where he decides to sleep with a woman, someone he can use and discard. The play Measure for Measure also demonstrates hollow appetites without true responsibility in Angelo, who's supposed to be such an upright and perfect person, but who turns into a phenomenal creep, who we discover has already not been taking responsibility for his relationships in the past. Troilus and Cressida has the young Prince Troilus, who seems like he's going to be undyingly faithful, but he's infinitely suspicious of Cressida. And he also does absolutely nothing to defend her or protect her, ultimately letting her fall into the hands of his enemies and then sitting back and being angry with her for doing what she has to do to survive. There's a pervading cynicism in them, and even though at least All's Well That Ends Well and Measure for Measure end in the form of a comedy, we don't feel a happily ever after. There's a kind of cynicism to them. And yet none of these three is so cynical as Troilus and Cressida. The overarching story of heroism, which is very thinly painted over crude and hedonistic characters, is most notably seen in Helen of Troy, who is the most shallow and hollow woman in all of existence in this play. And Troilus, who lets out these high-minded protestations, but ultimately becomes very bitter and awful by the end of the play. David Bevington, in his introduction to the Bantam collection of all three of the problem plays, says, "What is to save the erring and irresponsible male, so unwilling to face the demands of maturity, if the female is unable to nurture him or is repulsed finally by his way of using her? What if the woman is vulnerable, hurt, groping for sustenance from a man despite her wariness of them, unable finally to be charitable or loyal in the light of her own embittered experience? These characters have so many inner problems that cannot just simply be resolved in a marriage scene. And as usual, Shakespeare asks us questions that don't necessarily have answers, but cause us to stop and reflect on the world around us. Sometimes the comedy is rotten from the inside. Thanks for watching. You can click to subscribe or to watch another video, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.